something like 90% of us live in towns and cities,
Yes.
and our biggest way of interacting with wildlife is what we see in the garden. So around half of us feed birds,
Yep.
and we spend in the region of £200 to £300 million a year feeding birds. It's an enormous amount of money,
Yeah.
and we provide tons and tons of food to one point source. And so one of the questions I'm interested in asking is, what are the consequences of doing that for urban biodiversity?
Yeah.
The second, of course, is while we love our birds and we end up providing food for them, provide nest boxes for them, we also love our pets, and we have cats. And in the UK, there are over 10 million pet cats.
Wow.
Those 10 million pet cats can be a density in urban areas easily of over 400 cats in a square kilometre. In Reading, we have 450 or so on average, and that's the equivalent biomass of about 11 Bengal tigers in 1 square kilometre.
My
So
God.
huge numbers of predators added to an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so people haven't really thought about the importance of these species and these behaviours, what we do and how we affect the ecosystems around us. So what our work has shown is that if you feed wild birds, there are certain benefits. So people feed red kites in Reading.
Yeah.
And now you've got this huge bird of prey coming into gardens because people are feeding it. So it's in an area it would never otherwise be. But also it can have negative effects. If you feed birds, you attract in things like squirrels, predators,
Yeah.
and they then hunt around where the feeder is, and your chance of surviving and breeding in an area near to a feeder is significantly reduced. So in our work, around half of birds will breed successfully if they're not near a feeder.
Yeah.
Near a feeder, and by that I mean within a garden of a feeder, it's down to only around 10%. So there's a huge impact there. Feeders can affect disease transmission, even though our work suggests they're not as bad as some people are worried about. But the other problem is we do things like feed squirrels instead
Yes.
of feeding the birds. The
Yes.
squirrels come in. Squirrels are a major pest in some parts of the country. They obviously have impacts on red squirrels, a native species. And so what we find is that something like if the squirrels are present, they reduce food going to birds by
Yeah.
about 60%. And if a squirrel is present, no birds will feed on the feeder. So that works there. Cats, on the other hand, our work shows that they kill somewhere in the region of 180 million prey items a year in the UK, 60 million birds. But does it matter? And the question is, in an ecological sense, it's really hard to tell. And my suspicion is that what's happening is that those species that can cope with predation are the ones that are still there, and those that can't are just absent. So it's really hard to see the effects of this predation. So really what I guess I'm interested in doing is using what seems like a fairly mundane thing. People feed birds, they have pet cats, but these have enormous implications for biodiversity, for conservation. And I'm interested in trying to understand how this input of food and input of predators
Yeah.
changes how we can affect conservation. Because this is where pretty much everybody comes into contact with wildlife. If people don't go into the countryside the way they used to, we don't live in the countryside anymore. So how do you connect? And it's there in front of you, what's outside your garden, in your garden, the birds that you're feeding. How do we persuade people to do it the right way, to engage with it, to make sure that we maximise biodiversity? That's what I care about.